Well, good morning, everyone. It is true, I like to drive race cars. My favorite is open wheel cars, like Indy or Formula One or Formula cars. But I have also driven NASCAR, so that's my fun time hobby sometimes. Welcome to this session this morning. I'm going to be your tour guide as we think about the core competencies that NACM has published and another document talking about court leader responsibilities. And this session was conceptualized by two people. My co-presenter is not able to be here today, TJ BeMent, and so I'll give a shout out to TJ if by chance he is watching. And I'll also give a shout out to those who are watching the live stream or will watch the recorded session. My job is to be your tour guide as we go through lots of material very fast. And I am high energy. Some of you have seen me before. I want to make sure we have time for some interaction. I'm going to pose some questions to you. I'm going to ask you to think about court leadership and excellence and your competencies and your roles. You each should have some index cards. We will put those to use in a little while. As we prepared this session, we wanted to do two things. We wanted to link the idea, the discussion here, to the competencies that NACM has published. Competencies for court leaders. There are 13 of them. How many of you went to the session yesterday that reviewed the core competencies of, what was it, budget and case flow management? How many went to that? Okay, maybe a third of you. This is not a repeat of that class, but this will draw from some of the competency ideas within those core competencies. We also wanted to draw out information and share from a guide that NACM published called The Court Administrator, Court Administration, a Guide to the Profession. So our session draws from ideas from both of those sources. They are available to you. They are on the NACM website. TJ and I have provided links to all those documents with our presentation materials in the NACM app. You can access all of those 13 competencies and curriculum. In other words, descriptive information about what the competency is about, why it's important, what you as leaders need to know. You can access all of that from the NACM website. Likewise, you can access this little booklet called The Court Administrator, a Guide to the Profession. Hard copy, old style, looks like this. You can access this electronically on the NACM website, or you can purchase this. Many court leaders have bought these to share and disseminate, working from a paper-based document that's helpful in your court. So our session is built around these two documents. The theme of this conference is excellence on a global scale, right? And our idea was to talk about court leaders, competencies, roles, so that we can have excellence. When I talk about court leaders, I am referring to every single one of our types of jobs, not just the judge, not just the top administrator, but regardless of what your job title is. You might be a manager of a work unit. You might be a manager of a court interpreter team. I consider you a court leader. So I consider this material important for all of us. When we think about leadership and excellence, I want to ask you this question, and I would like your answer verbally. What is your number one tip or piece of advice to others about leadership and excellence? What tip or advice would you have for others? Let me get the mic ready. Anybody have an answer to that? What tip or advice would you tell others about leadership and excellence?
Learn how to listen, people.
Learn how to listen. What do y'all think? Good one? Yes. What else? Someone else. Oh, got it. Okay. You have a tip back here, okay? And then she'll go over there. Right here.
It piggybacks off of what she said. I think communication and keeping everybody on the same page.
Communication, keep everybody on the same page. Yes.
Lead by example.
Oh boy, lead by example. That is a biggie. Yes. How about up here, Verlyn?
I think transparency and justification when it comes to your decision making.
Transparency, especially when you're making decisions that impact the workforce. Very good. I see one more hand over here. Let's get one more comment.
Excuse me.
Verlyn did not know she was going to have an exercise class.
Thank you. The willingness to be able to delegate to others.
That's a good one too. Willingness to delegate. Do we have anyone else? Yes. How about up here, Verlyn? Should be on.
Yes, try to inspire people, lead by inspiration.
Try to inspire people. Oh, someone else thought of another. Good.
One that I've learned has been very important is be willing to ask questions and look for advice of others, because everyone has different viewpoints and you get a better idea in the end if you actually take others into account.
That is good. Listen to other viewpoints. Do we have another one? Please.
For a leader to be respectful and not feared. And another thing he says, so try to find solutions rapidly and efficiently.
Very good. Try to find solutions. Try to solve problems. Be respected, not feared. We can all think of leaders we've known who don't practice that. One last hand. Yes, please.
To always be present.
Oh, and what do you mean by present?
I learned very early on in my career that when somebody would come in and talk to me, if I didn't stop everything I was doing and giving them my absolute attention, I failed to get what they were trying to tell me. And early on, I want to say close to 40 years ago, when that happened and I had to have an interaction with that particular employee, they specifically said, I came to your office, I talked with you about this, but you were busy. And from that one time 40 years ago, I have always felt that it was important that when somebody came into the office, whether it was regarding something that was urgent or something that was in the future, to stop what I was doing, not answer the phone, don't look at my cell phone, don't be sitting there trying to type a memo on the computer, but be present in the conversation, be respectful.
Be present. These are all great comments, and I can tell I don't need to teach anymore. You all know this stuff, right? You are bringing real-life practical tips. Thank you for sharing. You will see elements of these included in the NACM core competencies when you read them in depth, which I invite you to do, and you will see mention of these in that little guide that I was showing you. Be respectful, be present, ask questions, be a role model. You will see elements of these in those documents. When you think about leadership, I know you can identify some qualities of leaders and some traits. So what I would like you to now do is turn to a partner and talk just for 2 minutes. What are some leadership qualities and traits that you can think of? You've mentioned some already, but turn and share with a partner, or if it's easier with 3 of you, for just a couple minutes, what are some leadership traits and characteristics? So, chat with your partner and then I'll ask for some sharing. Okay, I'm going to stop you. Already? I know, you were on a good discussion. All right, I'm going to stop you and ask for someone to volunteer. What are some leadership qualities or traits that you talked about? Anybody want to share a leadership quality or trait? What did you find?
Thanks. Strong personality.
Strong personality.
Convincing.
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 Good.
Your team and vision.
Oh, having vision. Yes.
Vision. Teamworker.
Teamwork.
And strict comply with laws.
Oh, that's a good one in courts. Comply with the law. Follow the law. Wow. Who would have thought? That's a good one. That's a good one. Who else? Leadership traits or qualities?
We talked about being caring and passionate.
Caring, passionate, good. Anybody over here volunteer?
We talked about being a team player and accountable and responsible.
Team player, accountability, responsible. Yes.
We talked about being approachable and integrity.
Those are good ones. Approachable, integrity. This makes me think of our plenary speaker yesterday afternoon who said, what was his question? What do I expect of myself? We're kind of asking that of ourselves on the topic of leadership and excellence. I have put together a slide with some words about excellence. So take a look at this. I know the print is small from the back, but on this it has sustaining results, adding value, succeeding through the talent of people, managing with agility, being flexible. There's several others here, and I've posted a chart right on this column that has some more words. Do you see any you recognize? I apologize, folks over here can't see it, but it's got things like extraordinary, superb. The question I am inviting us to think about is, what traits do we want to learn to do better? What traits of excellence and leadership do we want to study and try to demonstrate with our staff? Two things I want to point out related to leader excellence. We might be talking about what is the competency that you have as a leader. In other words, what is your knowledge, your skills, and your ability? What are your skills and talents? The other thing, though, what is your role? Although I said I consider all of you as leaders, you may have different roles in the court system. You might be expected to be a manager, a top supervisor, a judge. You have different and discrete roles, right? So that role may impact also what you're trying to do with leadership. Let us now dive into the core competencies. For the third or so of you who went to the session yesterday, you heard a preview about the competencies overall and two different ones, right? Case flow and, was it budget and fiscal?
They didn't do case flow.
Did not do case flow. Okay.
And performance management and budget.
Okay, all right. Here is a chart. You can access this on the NACM website as well. That is just a visual one-page guide to what the competencies are. Before we dive into them, though, I want to ask you another question. TJ and I thought of this as a leadership puzzle. In the leadership competency that NACM has published, there are these 8 different, again, I'll use the word roles of leaders. And I want to ask you to think about which one do you think is most important? And I'm going to ask Barbara and Verlyn to help count because I want to get a count from you. We have 8 up here. Innovator, communicator, strategist, motivator, diagnostician, collaborator, statesman, and visionary. Which do you think is most important? Let me ask for a show of hands. Who thinks innovator is the most important? Raise your hand. And I'm asking you to pick one. Who thinks innovator is most important? Do we have any hands? All right, put a 0. Thank you, Barbara. How about communicator? How many of you think communicator is most important? Raise your hand. Hold your hand up so we can count. Are you counting, Verlyn? Thanks.
5. Okay, one more time. 5.
I have 15 for this section.
13 plus 15 plus. Huh?
I have 14 on this.
All right. That's good. 42? And this was a 0. Okay, we see one that's already being more popular, right? Okay, how many think strategist is the most important? Raise your hand high. Strategist. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 or 6?
5 with the middle on this.
And I'll let you write it up here. So maybe put 6.
How many do you have?
Next item, motivator. How many of you think motivator is the most important? Raise your hands up. Motivator. You think that's the most important leadership role? Motivator. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the other side. Diagnostician. If you think diagnostician is the most important leadership role, raise your hand. I think we have 2. 2, 3. It's growing. It's growing. Okay, next up, collaborator. How many of you think collaborator is the most important leadership role? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. 3. All right, 4. We got a 4. Statesman. Now, the definition of statesman is a respected government leader. Okay? I had a problem with statesman. I was trying to find another word. I could not. But in the NACM competency on leadership, it describes statesman as a respected government leader or official. How many think that's the most important? I'm asking you to vote once. You voted more than once. Are you from Chicago? All right. Statesman, who thinks that's the most important? Wow. 0. Okay. Rounding this out, how many think being a visionary is number 1? Visionary. Keep your hand up. I know, you like all of them. Are we good? Thank you, Verlyn. Thank you, Barbara. Now you can see, using these 8 leadership roles, we have a difference of opinion. And this may mean we identify with skills we're already comfortable with. This may mean we have a yearning for this talent because it's missing in our workplace. And I will invite you, think about these. Which one or more or all of these do you need to develop and use in your workplace? I will pause for a second and add here, TJ, BeMent, and I will be presenting a webinar for NACM in September of this year. We will use some of the content from this session, and we will be building on this kind of feedback that you just shared with me. So this is very interesting to us to hear your assessment of these leadership roles. Every one of these is important. Again, I invite you, which one of these do you think, or which multiples of these, do you want to gain skill and use in your work environment? Okay, let's get into some of the competencies. There is much material on each of these slides, lots of words. I'm not going to read them. I don't expect you to read them. On each slide, and I invite you to go look at the slide on the app conference website. On each slide, it includes the learning objectives for that competency. In other words, what's the reason to learn and what will you know after you gain that competency? On each one of these slides, there are also phrases that describe what is the leadership takeaway, or what is it that directly links to leadership excellence? That's this session, leadership excellence. So the first competency is purposes and responsibilities. And our idea is, in this competency, the most important leadership takeaway is that you are proficient in knowing what are the purposes of courts, being proficient. So that's one word I'm going to use for this slide. I invite you to go read these in depth after the session. Here is some more of the learning objectives for purposes and responsibilities. And my key leadership word on this was what? Proficient. Be proficient. Know what the role of a court is. Know why your court exists. Okay, the next competency area is public trust and confidence. In this one, I think the key leadership takeaway is appreciation. Appreciating the importance of public trust and confidence, and appreciating that your court may or may not do things that earn that trust. So appreciation, that's what I think is critical related to this competency. Here are some more learning objectives. And just to point out one on the bottom of the slide, an objective from this learning in the competencies is to assess how well you are doing. Assess the court users, maybe even the court employees' view of how much they have trust and confidence in the organization. Okay, the next competency is case flow and workflow. Case flow management is the process of handling all of the disputes or the cases that come before our courts, and workflow management is the set of processes and protocols and resources that we make available to do case flow management. So the key word I think is important here, the key leadership takeaway, is understanding. Understanding the elements of case flow management. What are the things that are known best practices for handling cases? Understanding the elements. More learning objectives for case flow and workflow. The next competency is operations management. This is a big category, a catch-all, if you will, of all kinds of operational needs to make a court run, like customer service counter, like staffing courtrooms with clerks, like providing interpreters, all the things that it takes to make a court run. Operations management is the title of this competency. Within this competency, there are about 17 discrete areas. I already mentioned interpreters. Information technology is another one. Emergency preparedness is another. Access for litigants. This is a huge competency all in itself, but it is an important one. The key leadership takeaway for this one is attentiveness. We as court leaders need to be attentive, familiar, if you will, with all of the operational needs from court security. Do we have the records available? Attentiveness is the key leadership takeaway on this one. The next competency of NACM is public relations. Public relations has to do with how are you interacting, perhaps sharing information, disseminating details about the operation, being responsive, maybe even interacting with community and agencies. The leadership takeaway for this one, the key important thing, is comfort. Being comfortable talking about the operation, being comfortable engaging and collaborating with others. Public relations. And just for an example, one of the learning objectives in this competency is to be comfortable and be prepared to do press releases, to officially interact with the media, social media. So this is public relations. The key leadership thing for this is comfort. Not all of us have comfort on this one. Not all of us want to go before the media, right? Comfort, that's the leadership takeaway for this one. The next competency is educational development for staff, for judges, everyone in the organization. The key takeaway on this one is willingness. Being willing as a leader to make this important. Being willing to provide educational opportunities, like sending people to a NACM conference. Willingness. And part of that willingness is to make sure we as leaders understand what the educational needs are for our staff. Maybe our justice partners need to have some access. Maybe those in other related agencies need to have access to how is the court doing case flow management? How is the court managing customer service? Willingness. The next competency is workforce management. Workforce management relates to managing the human resources that we have in our organization. And in this one, we identified the key leadership takeaway as familiarity. A leader should be familiar with What are our resources? Where are we spending our money on our human resources? How are they doing? What do they need from the organization? What do they need from me as a leader? Willingness. Again, I'll say on all of these competencies, you can go read in detail. Most of these competencies have material that spans from 70 to 100 plus pages. You can go get access to anything that you want to know in each of these topic areas. Here is everyone's favorite, ethics. This competency has to do with knowing about ethical expectations, which range from confidentiality to conflict of interest, ethics. In this one, the leadership takeaway is being sensitive to ethics issues, being sensitive to what the codes of conduct and codes of performance are, codes of judicial conduct, sensitivity. Budget and fiscal management is the next competency. And the key takeaway that we identified for this one is detail. Be willing to be detail-oriented, to understand the budget, to know it, to be able to talk about it, to be able to defend it, even to be able to find ways to save money in the budget. This competency is budget and fiscal management. Here's a related one, but different. This one is accountability and court performance. The skills of being accountable and developing practices so that you can measure and talk about court performance. This is accountability and court performance. Performance management, statistics, analysis. The key leadership takeaway for this one is willingness to deal with this. Lots of our court leaders, myself included in the past, did not want to touch data or statistics or measures. It is becoming more important for our courts to find ways to be accountable, to find ways to organize and present information. So the key takeaway I noted on this one is willingness. The last three of these competencies are perhaps higher level competencies that leaders all should recognize, and even everyone at every position in the court, but they are more executive level expectations. The first is leadership. And this one I wrote the key leadership takeaway, stamina. You have to be in this with passion and endurance. You have to have stamina as a leader. This competency says things like understand the importance of credibility. You've mentioned that in your early comments. Understand the importance of having a good governance structure in your court. How are we going to lead ourselves? This competency is leadership, and the leadership takeaway, or the important trait that I have identified, is stamina. I would add to that perhaps being willing to take risks, perhaps being willing to take calculated risks. Don't be a wallflower. Don't be shy. We are leaders of our organization, right? This competency has great content in it. I would invite you to go read it when you have time. The next competency is strategic planning. Strategic planning, and this competency deals with skills of creating and defining what the court wants to achieve, a strategic plan, an action plan for 1 or 4 or 5 or 10 years. The key takeaway in this one is long-term thinking, being future-oriented. Don't just get bogged down in today's problem. The leadership competency includes a definition of these leadership roles that we already voted on, and it talks about the importance of being an innovator and a visionary and a communicator. And I will tell you, when I do consulting in courts, there are always two things that surface when we evaluate problems in courts, and they are communication and relationships. Communication and relationships. And they're included sort of in this list, and they are important leadership traits. So this is leadership, this is strategic planning, and the key takeaway here is long-term or future thinking. The next competency is, and I apologize, you can't see the text very well up here, governance. Court governance. This has to do with how are we going to organize ourselves, how are we going to define our different roles and relationships in the organization. And the key leadership takeaway on this one, should sound familiar, is communication and collaboration. Communication and collaboration. That was 13 competencies that we went through in how many minutes? We have flown through them. I do invite you to read the slides. I invite you to go look at all of the competencies. There are great descriptions of why they're important, of how to do them. There are exercises. There are ideas that you can take back and use for your own learning, or you can take back and use to teach and share with staff. Let me now go into the second source for this session, which is the Court Administrator Guide. It is literally a guide that talks about what is a court administrator, what are the responsibilities, perhaps what educational requirements should people consider when getting a court administrator. Very comprehensive, and yet very compact. And this is the document also that you can either purchase a booklet or download it free of charge from the NACM website. In this guide, it includes information about the history of court administration in the US. How did it come to be? Why has it been so important? It includes why have a position as a court administrator. It talks about the relationship of administrators to judges, a very important thing. Judging by the session yesterday that was standing room only, that not all of us could get in. What do you do when the roles collide and the powers don't align? It talks about this. It also talks about some of the roles and qualifications, everything I've been talking about so far. And professionalism. Why is affiliating with others who do the same work important? Let me touch real quickly about the history. In the US, court administration developed because it became apparent that court organizations were getting more and more complex in their operation. There was a need for someone to be a professional manager, a court administrator, a court executive. Court operations were getting more multifaceted, more splintered, if you will, and there was a need for someone to be kind of the glue that held the organization together. And there was increasing need to have the organization as a whole be more professionalized and aligned in terms of competence and excellence. Again, the linkage to leadership excellence. Caseloads were becoming more complex, and in many instances, the volume of the work was growing. So there was a recognition and a need for trained court administrators. Back in the 70s, the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court said this. We're talking about Warren Burger. The courts of this country need management which busy and overworked judges with drastically increased caseloads cannot give. We need a corps of trained administrators or managers to manage and direct the machinery so that judges can concentrate on their primary duty of judging. This then is kind of the backdrop of why have our kinds of positions been created. Workloads, complexity, the need to save judicial time and resources and skills for judicial tasks. That's why court administration grew up. That's why we're all here today. That's why we're privileged to have both international and representatives from the states. There is a challenge, though, the relationship between the judge and the administrator. In this booklet, there is this graphic that talks about what we have come to call the executive partnership or executive leadership. The judge with judge-related duties and knowledge and maybe extensive legal training, and the administrator with operational administrative duties and an appreciation for and an understanding of how to make all the pieces work effectively. This is often called the executive partnership or executive leadership. There are different roles and qualifications for court administrators. You may play a different role in your organization. You might be a unit manager, even if you're a judicial officer. You might manage a single calendar, or you might manage a group of judges. You might be a supervisor, a frontline supervisor, or you might be the topmost leader of the organization. These can impact the knowledge, skills, and abilities you need. They can impact what you're already conversant in doing, and they may impact what you should continue learning. But another graphic, you may be asked to be a coach. You might ask to be a subject matter expert, right? Some of us in this room are subject matter experts. These all influence what is our role, what are the skills, what are the competencies. I guess I'd also ask you to think about, based on which one of these roles you are carrying out, what do you need to learn about leadership, excellence? What do you need to take away from the conference as a whole and gain skills? Where do you need to extend into another role? If you aspire to promote in your organization, if you aspire to take on new tasks, what does that tell you about how you need to prepare for that? This booklet also talks about the importance of professionalization, and it means some of the benefits from that, the affiliation with others, being here and sharing and networking, includes sharing information, sharing ideas, discussing problems and problem solving, getting access to tools, finding out about best practices. That's what this week is all about. Finding out about best practices and who's doing something that works that might work in my court. Having educational opportunities, attending conferences, being aware of and subscribing to a code of conduct, a professional code of how we will behave. Perhaps attending webinars. I mentioned NACM will be putting on a webinar after this session. Interacting via committees, and ultimately problem solving. These are some of the benefits that this guide points out from affiliating with others who do our same work. So, what is leadership to you? Here's again a slide of a bunch of words. It can mean different things to different people. Does leadership mean motivating, being respected, garnering trust? There is no wrong answer. There is an endless list of answers. Excellence, we already talked about excellence. We've got some words posted up here. You've shared ideas earlier. What does excellence mean to you? In my mind, this parallels the question we heard yesterday. What do we expect of ourselves? In our remaining time, I want you to do some thinking. What do I need to change? What do I need to do? What skills do I need to acquire related to leadership excellence? And let me talk you through this slide. This slide says 52% of the public agree that just like any business, courts need to change. They need to change with the times to meet the needs of the customers and to keep up with innovations. And I would add, courts need to change to keep up with our own level of skill and excellence. So, I want you individually to think about what do you want to change related to your leadership excellence. And as you answer that question for yourself, this first bar up here says lead with the heart. I would ask you to be true to who you are. Do something that you feel passionate about. The item you identify that you want to change or get better at. Make it something that's real for you. The second bar up here says create a plan. Think about how can you go about making this change. If, for example, you want to understand budget management better, you might go to a class on budgeting, right? So whatever your chosen topic to improve your leadership is, think about what can I do to start to get there. The third one on here is use your skills wisely. And that I would translate as be realistic. Think about how you really can start those first steps. Use your skills wisely. And the last one says aim for the stars. This relates to we should all get out of our pattern and our practice and get our skills and our excellence to a higher level. So put another way, I want you, using one of the index cards, I want you to write down one takeaway you got from this whirlwind tour of the competencies and court administrator roles. One takeaway. Write it on the card for yourself, and then I will ask for some volunteers. Something you want to do as a result of hearing about these competencies and hearing about court administrator as a role and a profession. Okay. Write this on the card for yourself. What is one thing you want to do as a result of hearing about leadership excellence, the competencies that NACM has published, the role of a court administrator? Write down one thing he wants to do to improve his excellence in court administration. If you have more than one thing, you can certainly list that, but I would like you at least to think of one thing you would like to start doing. Now I would like you again to turn to your partner or your seatmate or those around you and share, what did you come up with? What do you want to change in terms of your leadership excellence? What skills do you want to get? Where do you want to start? Turn and share with your partners.
Do you want me to give you a 5-minute warning or anything? Okay, and I've had a couple people ask.
Oh, okay, please.
that's for different things. It's not really
Let's come back together if you would, please. Let's come back together. This is great sharing. All right, let's hear from some of you. Let's hear from some of you. This was obviously a topic of interest, right? What do I want to do to get even better as a leader? Let's hear from some of you. Anybody care to volunteer? What did you share with your neighbor? What do you want to do to get better? And I'll ask Verlyn to bring you the mic. Do we have a volunteer? All right, please.
I just said that I know what I do. I can't articulate what I do.
Oh, you know what you do, but you can't articulate it. I have taught a class on the importance of doing an elevator speech. Anybody know what an elevator speech is? It's like a minute-long description of something, whether you're a salesman or describing what the court does. That would be a wonderful leadership accomplishment if you could come up with a very clear way of describing what you do. Yes, good. Anyone else want to share? What did you have on your list? Are you raising your hands? Verlyn. Oh, I'll get it.
Thank you, Janet. Lead to develop leaders.
Oh, develop leaders.
Yes.
Help others grow. Succession planning. Oh, yes. That's important. Who else? What did you discuss? We got someone back there.
Just a reminder that you have to find balance between all of the competencies and to be flexible and know which to implement at any given time.
Find balance. We went through 13 core competencies. That is a lot. NACM expects that we as court leaders will be familiar with them and we will appreciate what's in them, but we may not all at one time know all of it or be the expert. Finding balance and knowing which one might be important at what point in your career or in your leadership role. Yes. Who else? What did you share? What is something you want to take away from this session?
Maybe if I say it out loud, it will happen. To be more deliberate about my own professional, growing my leadership skills and, not just write down all these books that I'd like to read and competencies that I'm going to scroll through, but just do it.
I see a lot of people nodding. Be more deliberate. You could call that a personal plan. A personal plan. Excellent. Anyone else want to share? Something you plan to do, a takeaway as a result of this session?
Thank you.
Yes.
To improve the court administration, we can so to the digitalization.
Go digital, move things into digital records.
And networking, of course, law enforcement, prisons, and probation office.
Networking of the information between all these.
Oh, that's a big one. Okay, so use technology to share information with probation, law enforcement. In the states, we use the term stakeholders, justice partners. Who is affected by your work? Who needs to help you with your work? Yes, there is some good content in some of these competencies about working with partners. Working with partners. Remember early on I asked you what is one tip or advice you would have for leaders? Let me ask you that again. Having been through this whirlwind tour, what is one tip or advice that you would have if you had a brand new leader coming into your organization? What would you tell them?
Be patient.
Be patient.
Give yourself time and work through it day by day.
Work through it day by day. Give yourself time. Be patient. That's great. Coming back here.
To piggyback on that is to always pursue self-growth and be self-aware and allowing for forgiveness for yourself as you fail and then rise up again and try again.
Be patient. Don't give up. The funny thing about leaders, and I think you've probably experienced this, is staff will come to us with a problem and expect us to what? Solve it. Have all the answers. Guess what? Do we have all the answers? Yes. I'm going to work in Barbara's court. So we're put on this pedestal as leaders, and we don't always have all the answers. And we sometimes need continued self-growth and patience. So thank you for sharing. I have one last request of you, and this is with the remaining index card that you have. TJ and I want to know, what is it that NACM or IACA can do for you to help you as a court leader to gain excellence? What is it that NACM or IACA could do? I'm going to collect these cards. I know they will be a treasure trove of your ideas. So write on a card, write as legibly as you can, what is it that an organization like NACM or IACA can do to help you get even greater leadership excellence? Please take a moment and write down your thoughts. Put another way, what is it that NACM can do to support your leadership development and excellence? After you have something written there, I want you to either place that card in my hot little hand, or leave it at your seat, or make sure Verlyn gets it. Because this is important feedback. Thank you, you're a good role model. This is important feedback for how we can help ourselves, okay? Some of you have asked, where are these materials? This PowerPoint slide set is on the NACM app, so if you have logged into that, it is there. I believe it is also on the NACM website, so all of these slides are there. Where are the materials that I referred to, the core competencies? Those are also on the NACM website. And where is that court administrator guide, the little booklet? You can get that from the website, or you can buy copies of that. The slides had lots of detail. My goal was not to read them, but to expose you to this and invite the discussion about leadership, excellence, and competence. As we leave here, I have one closing quote for you. What do sailors do? People that sail ships, what do? Navigate. Stay the course. Swab the decks. That's good. That's like asking what do court administrators do. They clean the bathroom if needed. Funny thing, I was going for a job interview to be a higher level administrator, and the interview question to me was, if you walked through the court and you saw that a clock on the wall was at the wrong time of day, what would you do? What do you think the right answer was? Call maintenance? No. Change it. Get involved. Do it. Take action. And so my closing quote for you, if sailors navigate and stay the course, sometimes it gets bumpy, right? When you go back all enthused, when you go back saying, here's my personal action plan, here's what I want to do, and you run into roadblocks or the seas get choppy, remember this. Smooth seas do not good sailors make, right? You're not going to learn to be good until you kind of go through some troubles. So, I want to thank all of you for your participation and your sharing and your voting, because this will be used in the webinar. And more importantly, I want your little cards with your ideas about what an organization like NACM can do to support your leadership development. Thank you to Verlyn and thank you to Barbara for being our host and reporter. And more importantly, thank you for attending, and thanks to those watching on the video. Have a great rest of your day.